Hello everyone, today I'm going to talk about my remote working experience in Boston as a software engineer based in Mountain View. The reason I came to Boston is because we are remote working anyway, and I want to take the chance to experience the life of the East Coast. Out of all the candidate cities that I've considered, like New York, Pennsylvania, and Boston, I think Boston is generally smaller, but it has a lot of good universities, and the city is very well managed. There is less security considerations, and people are generally nicer here. Um, and also there's a lot of places of interest like the Charles River and Harvard University, MIT, and a lot of historical buildings in the downtown area. So I've considered two ways to come here. One is by driving, and according to Google Map, it takes around 50 hours, which means even if I drive 8 hours per day, it will still take 1 week. I certainly cannot stand such tiring and boring thing, and so I decided to search on Google for some transportation companies, and it turns out I find a company that can transport my car in $2,000. Also considering my back seat is packed with a lot of my stuff, they will charge 300 extra, but still I think the price is worth it because I've got to move all my belongings from the West Coast and East Coast, which isn't a very easy job. And I booked a flight 1 week after my car is taken so that I can pick up my car as soon as I arrive at the Boston airport. So one of the main reasons I come to East Coast is that I've heard that the gender ratio in the East Coast is much better comparing to Bay Area or Seattle, where there's a lot of single male software engineers like me. There's a lot more single females in the East Coast and more chances to find a proper date. As far as I've observed on my social app, like Tantan and the Coffee Meets Bagel, I think it's probably true. I've got 160 matches on Tantan and 50 matches on Coffee Meets Bagel, and I've already dated five from each of the application. Two of the friends I met in the Bay Area who are software engineer and now remote working in the New York also have found some date here. I think the rumor is probably true that East Coast is better in this area. Also, I've attended a lot of offline activities like some Chinese board games like 剧本杀, and I've also went to some nightclubs. And generally, I think it's better to know someone offline because there are a lot of liars or someone using fake pictures on dating app that you need to take a lot of time to figure out. So I arrived in Boston on April 18th, and I've been around 3 months from then. Before I even come here, I have already find a match on Coffee Meets Bagel, and she said she could pick a hotel or also pick me up at the airport. But sadly, my flight is a bit late, so she didn't really come. And for some reason, I couldn't really find a Uber to drive me, and I don't know about the public transportation either. So I just walked around in the Boston airport for around 2 hours until I finally found a booth downstairs that can call a normal taxi for me. And it was already 9 p.m. when I arrived in the downtown area and my hotel, which is Boston Park Plaza. But the girl that I matched insists that she wants to have dinner with me, so she called a taxi here, and it was already 10 p.m. when we start eating. Uh, we had some very good conversation, talk about the books we read and our plan for the job and the future. Like she just graduated from Northeastern University and she's planning to find some internship and then read a PhD. Uh, After that night, we hung out with each other a few times. Mostly we will walk around the Harvard and MIT campus or just go out for some dining, but we didn't become a couple for some reason. Anyway, so the reason I live in Boston Park Plaza is I couldn't really live in my apartment that I leased immediately because someone was still living in there. So I live in the hotel for 1 week. Um, the hotel has a nice location, but the room wasn't quite nice because it was too small that I couldn't even set up my monitor on the desk. So I had to use my laptop for working, but it was only 3 or 4 days of work, so I just endured that. The hotel has a very nice gym, um, a lot of equipment, and I really like the color and decoration there. So I lived in the hotel for 7 days until April 25th. I could really move in the apartment that I leased. I was kind of curious why the apartments in Boston is almost the same price as those ones in New York. But it turns out that the Boston apartments is a lot larger, so I think it's pretty worth it. I lived there for around 2 weeks until May 9th. I had some arguments with my roommates, so I decided to find one B room, but it took another week before I can move in. So I think, okay, why not take a trip around Boston? So I open my Airbnb app and search for nearby areas, and I find this really nice cabin that is located in Cape Cod and only has a rent of a little bit above 100 per night. And as you can see, it's a pretty lonely cabin sitting in the forest and very small. But it definitely has the isolated and lonely feeling of the little wooden house in the wild, according to my imagination. So I lived there pretty satisfied, and I stayed there for around 1 week. During that time, I would work in the daytime. Then after work, I would drive along the peninsula, either go to the sea or finding some seafood restaurant. And I also find this really good gym, which is called Willy's, that has not only lifting areas but also swimming pools and climbing areas. Most people working out there are elder people, and it was pretty empty. So I think I can tell that most people living that area are retired people. And I met this guy who was a lawyer and also a professional swimmer. His name is Frank, and he would come to Willy's to swim for an entire hour unstopped around 3,000 meters. I was really impressed that he would do this at the age of 60. And he taught me a lot of useful techniques in freestyle swimming, and I really appreciate that. So on May 14th, I went back to Boston from the gym. from the Cape Cod, um, and I attended barbecue meeting in MIT. Met some of my undergraduate schoolmates. And the next day, I went to see my second date, which is on Tantan, and she was an undergraduate student in University of Connecticut. It took around 1 hour to drive to that university, and the scenery along the road was really good. A lot of forest, and there were some lakes. The campus of University of Connecticut was really large, and combining with the fact there wasn't really a lot of people in there due to COVID, it gives me a feeling of desolation. But I think it will become better when students are coming out. So we had a hot pot together, and after that, I went back to Boston. So from May 15th to May 30th, nothing too exciting happens. I just stayed at home and just work and watch some Netflix and go to eat some restaurant. On May 30th, I went to New York um, and to meet with some of the friends and also meet with two of the dates that I met on Coffee Meets Bagel. I thought I really shouldn't come to New York on Friday afternoon again. It was really rainy and it took me around 7 hours to arrive there, and it was already 10 p.m. And I just find a very deprecated hotel in New Jersey, and also the parking lot wasn't didn't seem very safe, but I had no choice because it was too late. Um, the next day, I meet with one of the date for lunch, and we went to Hudson Yard and took some pictures at the skyscraper in Hudson Yard, which is said to be the tallest building now in New York, and pretty new also. It's built around 3 or 4 years ago. And after that, I had dinner with another date in Flushing. There are really a lot of good Chinese restaurants in Flushing. It was still early when I sent her back home. I decided to walk around the Manhattan downtown, and there were the K-Town and a lot of restaurants. Also, there were a lot of bars. And then I went to Columbia University to visit my friend who is a PhD in there. We had some conversation about um, his academic career and my job, and I come back to Boston on June 1st. Um, so that's pretty much my life in May and June. In the next video, I'm going to talk about my what happens in June and July. Things like nightclubs, fishing, and photography. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you.